Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the farm. The time has come. It's mid-July 2024, and we're going to harvest some honey. Or at least we're going to try. So I just mowed the lawn back here with the brush hog, and I made my way back to the beehives, got all suited up, and I have one jar with me, just a test jar, because I really want to see how this is going to work. The only hive, I think, that is ready for harvesting is my original yellow Auto-Flow Beehive. So I've alluded to the fact that there's a lot of panels and a lot of mechanisms back here that will allow you to access the honey. And I've looked at them, I've cleaned them out, I've explored the process, but I've never actually done this. So I don't really know what the physical process is going to be like to get all of these things apart that have been sitting here for about a year and a half now, untouched, and to actually make the mechanisms work to start the flow of honey. So as I'm inspecting and looking at the various mechanisms here that I'm going to have to open up, I'm noticing that there's a lot of residue. There's a few dead bees here and there that have to get cleaned out, but what it looks like is that on the inside of these plastic mechanisms, honey may have at some point drained down and then hardened and crystallized. So getting these plugs out is going to be a massive challenge. I tried twisting a couple of the plugs with my gloved fingers and they didn't budge. So then I grabbed these hive tools that I had in my bag and I tried kind of pressing them together, like pliers, because I don't have pliers on me, just to see if I could get some additional leverage and get them twisted. And they twist just a little bit, but not enough to actually turn them. So now I grabbed a couple other implements that I have with me. This long bar is the tool that you use to twist the mechanism inside this auto-flow mechanism that starts the flow of honey. And these are twisting just a little bit, and I got it just enough for one of these plugs to come out. And now that I have one out on one of these auto-flow frames, this is the frame that I'm going to experiment with. So up on the top here, there's some additional things that have to come out. These are all plugs that keep the bees from going inside. And fortunately up here, it was much easier. They're still tight, but at least they don't have crystallized honey holding them together. So using these same couple tools, I managed to get the next clear plastic plug out of the way relatively easily. Now here's where the problem comes in. I've never actually done this, and there's no instructions for how to start the flow of honey. I know you have to put one of these clear plastic tubes in, and I know you have to be ready with a jar for when the honey is supposed to flow. So I got all of that stuff in place, but actually manipulating the mechanism, twisting the lever, so to speak, to get this working, I don't really know how to do this. So you're watching with me as I'm experimenting. My assumption is that deep inside this frame, there's something that I have to kind of key into or lock into and then turn. And it just doesn't seem to be working. I know you're missing a lot of the action here, but I'm trying to film and figure it out. So I failed. I tried for about 5 minutes and I couldn't really figure out what to do, so I figured I'd go over to my new Auto-Flow hive, the one that I just set up probably 4 weeks prior to the filming of this video. And I want to pull one of these Auto-Flow frames out so that I could try and figure out what I'm supposed to be doing. What I'm figuring is that since this is new and it doesn't have any of that crystallized honey or any residue in it, it might give me an easier feel for what I'm supposed to do than with the Auto-Flow frame in the yellow hive that has all of that residue. So the process here is exactly the same. I'm just going to pull these plugs out and hopefully it's obvious as to what I should be doing. So I have this frame angled nicely, and once I get this plug out, my hope is that I could just look straight down the chamber and figure out if there is actually something down there that I need to be looking for. And as you would imagine, it's not as easy as what I hoped for. There's really nothing down in there. It's just an open cavity. Maybe from the other side something's more obvious, but unfortunately it's not. It literally looks like there's nothing in there. So this is a lot of trial and error right now. So remember, the main brand of these Auto-Flow Beehives is a company called Flow Hive. And this is not one of them. This is a Chinese knockoff. It was cheap on Amazon. So the downside is it came with really good assembly instructions, but absolutely no instructions for how to use it. So my assumption here, after looking at this, is if I just insert that metal rod all the way and twist, something may happen. And it did. I saw the combs kind of separate as I did it on this trial frame. So I'm going to do it exactly like this on the yellow beehive and see what happens. So here we go. The key here is to slide it into the lower slot and then twist. And as I expected, it's 100% resistance here. Probably because of all of that stuff that's jammed up in there. So I'm just doing it over and over and over again at different depths and lifting a little bit and just prying and seeing what happens. And eventually it felt like it freed up a little bit. So I'm going to twist it and leave it in the vertical position and see if anything actually happens here. So again, a lot of trial and error just to get this freed up and to see if anything happens. So here we go. Twisting it vertical, and is anything going to happen? I don't know what I'm expecting to happen. But then, out of nowhere, I saw magic happening down inside that flow tube. I thought maybe it was my imagination, so I'm retrying it a little bit. But something is actually happening because, as you can see, I have drips. And there's a very, very small stream of honey forming. So something is actually working here. I'm tipping the entire beehive backwards and putting just a little bit of a wedge in there to see if I could actually get a flow of honey. And here we go. Honey is actually flowing from this Auto-Flow Beehive. This is incredible. I don't know if I was expecting a really fast torrent of honey, like an immediate evacuation of honey. But I don't care. This is a very slow stream. And I'm wedging things under the front of the beehive to try and tip it backward just a little bit more in hopes that I could increase this flow of honey. It's probably about 90 degrees outside, so the honey is flowing really well for what it is. It's just I need to try and figure out a way to tilt the beehive backward even further so that I could get more honey out. So here you see sped up. This is maybe a 10-minute time lapse. And at best, that's a really, really thin stream of honey. I'm trying different things with tilting the beehive and trying to see if, more of an angle makes a difference. And it really didn't. It just seems like this is what the flow is out of this frame. So it's going to be a really slow, painful process. But the upside of this is all of this is happening in situ. I did not have to disassemble the beehive. I didn't have to uncap frames. I didn't have to spin frames. I didn't have to use a knife to peel off a layer of wax. All I had to do was kind of by trial and error figure out what to do, twisting that big long metal tool into the frame receiver up on top. And this is what happens. So as you're watching this, this is between 20 minutes, maybe 15 to 20 minutes. This is after about 30 minutes. So, yeah, not a quick process. I mean, this has been about a half an hour to get one jar of honey mostly filled. And I'm okay with that. I'm not doing any large-scale honey production over here. I'm not selling this by the jar. If I was selling this by the jar, then I would have to figure out a way to increase this. But this is basically one frame fully tapped out. So I've removed that little drain tube, and I'm draining the rest of it into this jar. And I think now that I know how to do this, I'm going to move on to the next frame and see what I can do. So I got the two plugs out, I got it twisted, and honey's flowing. So it seems like there's less in this frame than in the center frame that I just tried. But that's okay. I have another jar with me. If this one fills all the way up, then I can swap it. And here we go. Without spilling any, there we go. One full bell jar. And now I'm starting on the second one. If I could get 2 jars of honey, this would be pretty exciting. So as you can see, I have the front propped up with just stuff that I happen to have with me. If I could prop it up even further, that would be great. But the hives seem to be doing well. There's a lot of bee activity. Things are hopefully happening inside the hives. And I'm excited that now that I have one beehive producing honey, more will happen. So while I have some downtime, I wanted to take the opportunity to explore what actually is happening inside this second hive. Now this is a conventional Langstroth. So if I were ever to harvest honey out of this, it wouldn't be quite as easy as the auto frame next to it. I would actually have to pull all of those honey frames out, uncap them with a wax knife, and then spin them. But like I said, it's been about 4 weeks, so I'm excited to see what is actually happening up in this honey super. There should be a decent start to honey retention up here. The bees should be building out the honey cells, and if for no other reason, they should be doing this for winter storage. But I'm excited to see what's actually happening in here. So I'm pulling the center frame, which is usually the one where most is produced. And there's nothing. There's bees on it, but there's literally nothing happening. There isn't even a film of wax on here. So that's a little bit troubling. I'm gonna have to research this a little bit and figure out what's going on. But for now, let's get back to the honey action. So as expected, that second frame didn't have quite as much as the first frame. So I went the opposite direction to the left, and there's not much honey this way either. So I'm going to close off this frame, and I'm just going to go down the row. So this is the next frame. And as you can see, there's honey. Honey's flowing. This is just a really painfully slow process. Sped up, it actually looks really satisfying. The jar is filling up. Things are looking good. But at some point, even though it looks like there's a lot of honey in that collection tube up on the top, it just slows down to a really slow crawl. So I closed the frame. I'm opening the next one. I'm going to move that collection tube over one. And let's see. So now, just for some perspective, beekeepers say that per beehive, per season, they get 50 pounds or more of honey. Now recall that this hive has been untouched since I put the bees in there last May of 2023. It's currently July of 2024. So they've had a full year and 2 months to do whatever they need to do inside their hive. And the expectation here is that I will be receiving 50 pounds of honey. So now we wait. This is in the next receiving position. Honey should be flowing down through that internal frame mechanism, and I should start to see honey flowing as it comes out this collection tube. So there's definitely honey. It's dripping, but it's not quite the torrent of honey that I was expecting. So we'll just let it sit for a couple minutes. Again, the weather is nice and warm, so the honey should be flowing. And this one, it just happens to be flowing really, really slowly. And it just doesn't seem like there's the quantity that there was in the frames in the center of this hive. So I'm going to cap this one, drain it, and then move on to the next one down the row. I wasn't really expecting to do this to every single frame in the hive today. I really just wanted to do a test in the center frame to see what was going to happen. But fortunately, I had some time to kill today. So it seems like it's an okay day just to do all of them. So far, I've been here for about an hour, maybe a little bit more, maybe an hour and a half, going down frame to frame to frame. And here we are on the outermost 2 frames. There was literally nothing in the last frame. I let it sit for about 5 or 10 minutes, and there was a couple little drips. But here we are on the last frame on the right hand side of the hive. And we're cracking it open like we did before. I'm keeping the tool in there in the vertical position just to make sure that it stays open. And we wait, and hopefully there's a flow of honey out of here. But there doesn't seem to be anything. So I guess this is the humbling point where we talk about learning experiences. Everything on this farm so far has been a learning experience, whether it's working with equipment, or figuring out what to do with the field, or the buildings, or here, working with the bees. I seem to have a nice setup, and on paper, everything seems like it should be going properly, and yet, that does not entirely seem to be the case here. So what you're seeing on the table here is a little bit deceiving. It looks like I have 1 full jar of honey and 1 partially filled. I actually was able to extract a second jar, almost full. So what I really have here is 1 full jar, 1 almost full jar, and 1 jar that's about a third of the way. It's still not 50 pounds though, and that's the troubling part of this entire process. On paper, everything looks like it should be okay. And yet, the reality of the situation is that this has been a subpar performance for this one hive, sitting an entire year. But I guess that's part of the learning process. Trying to figure out, is this actually a failure or is it a success? there's more than nothing, which is good, but certainly not the 50 pounds as advertised. So here we are, full round trip. You saw me walk to the hive about 20 minutes ago, and now I'm walking back, semi-successful, I guess, with 2.5 jars of honey, or maybe just a little bit less. And now we go figure out what to do with that honey. So I guess that's exciting. So here we are. This is the entire summer honey collection for 2024. So in anticipation of a large honey production, I made some purchases. Thought this would be exciting to actually package up the honey and do things with it. So one of these kits from Amazon is these small little sampler jars. Came with lids, they came with the honey dipper, they came with little gold bee emblems and some twine to decorate the jars. So I thought it would be fun if I got all of these filled up and used them as Christmas gifts or passed them out at work. Honestly, I was expecting a lot more honey than what I actually got, because I bought a second kit, and these are small plastic jars with plastic lids, and I thought it would be fun to fill and decorate these as well. They came with labels. I don't plan on using these labels. I wanted to make custom labels. And yeah, there's a whole lot of jars. Unfortunately, I think we're only going to be filling a few of these jars. But let's see. Let's actually fill some jars. So this is the second jar that I collected. It's maybe, 3/4 full, maybe a little bit more. And let's see how far this actually goes. The honey looks great. It's nice and clear. It's a medium-ish color. It's not super light, but it's not super dark. So let's see how far this actually stretches. I just have a couple jars here to see what it's going to look like when finished. And I'm not going to lie, in my mind, I'm imagining doing this across 100 jars or 200 jars, because this is actually fun and satisfying. I'm hopeful that as I add more hives, and there's more of a colony to support these bees, the bees will produce more, because certainly they're right next to water. They have the resources they need. There's a ton of trees and shrubs and flowers and everything that they need to collect pollen and convert it to honey. So it seems like this should be a successful venture. And yet, the first year doesn't seem like it was entirely successful. But filling these jars is enjoyable, and I'm also in my mind thinking of the various things that I could do with this honey. I like tea, so I'll add some honey to tea. I could add it to recipes and cook fun things with the honey. I'm also thinking about the wax in the back of my mind, because I did have to scrape quite a bit of wax off of the hives, the shoulders of those frames, and various areas of the hives. I'm wondering what I could do with that wax. Right now it's just sitting in a box at the farm. But this looks like a interesting professional presentation of honey, like something you might buy in a store. So I guess let's go all the way. Let's decorate these couple glass jars. I mean, this kit came with all of this stuff, so let's see what it looks like. It came with these nice little gold metal bees. And I'm also going to tie in this honey dipper. And I guess if I just make a nice little bow tie, this will be a cool little presentation. This would make a nice gift. If somebody gave this to you, would you enjoy receiving it? Because I certainly would. I don't know that I would use the honey dipper or anything, but it makes for a nice presentation. So labeling is the next consideration here on my mind, and I have a nice little logo, and I thought you know, some rustic craft paper labels would look nice. So with the success of filling those few jars, I pulled out more jars. And it's actually filling more jars than what I thought it would, which is good. This is exciting for me because that means that I could do more with these. I could actually give them as gifts. I figured as long as I was able to fill more than 5 jars of each style of jar, then I would consider it a success. So yeah, this is an okay honey production, I guess, for what I got. So I bought this nifty little Bluetooth powered printer. It's a thermal printer. I bought it off Amazon. It was like 40 bucks. And then I bought these craft paper thermal labels. I think these are inch or inch and a half labels. And as with everything I do, the whole intent here is just to elevate the presentation of all of this. If you're going to take the time to do a job, to fill jars with honey, to tie on little accessories onto the jars, you might as well spend the time and make some interesting labels. So to go with the whole farm theme, I thought this was cool. And they actually came out halfway decent. So I spent about 15 minutes and I made a whole assortment of these stickers. And then I just went one by one through all the different bottles and I stickered them. So if you ever buy any of these printers off Amazon, there's some trial and error that is needed. This is not a name brand printer. They're not name brand stickers. And the app is okay, but in the end, you have to make sure everything is aligned and oriented in the machine. Otherwise, the stickers will print off center in the actual sticker. So I wasted a good chunk of these stickers, but it was a learning process. And in the end, about 15 minutes later, everything got stickered and it just made for a nice presentation. So now I can actually gift these and people will realize that this honey came from my farm. And that's awesome. That's cool. I enjoy doing this. So now let's fast forward through the summer. And here we are in the fall. This is early October 2024, and I came here as I normally do to check on the bees, and I wanted to see how things were progressing with this conventional Langstroth hive. If you recall, back in July, August, they didn't have anything built out on these honey supers, and this is alarming. This is their storage of food for the winter. And look at this. There's nothing on these honey supers. So the implication here is that I'm not going to be collecting honey from this hive this year. But the bigger issue is because they've produced nothing, they don't have enough honey inside their hive to sustain them over the winter. Now, I don't know why this happened. I did some reading on this, and some people said if you spray a water diluted honey mixture onto the supers, the bees will be more likely to start filling them out. I don't know. I've never run into this. Obviously, I'm brand new to anything bee related, but I will say that the 2 Auto-Flow beehives that I have were completely filled with honey, at least for the summer harvest. And that brings up a point. Everything that you read says that per hive, you're supposed to collect 50 pounds of honey or more per hive. So I have 3 hives here, and this year I've been able to collect 2 mason jars full of honey. 2.5. So what does that mean? Does that point to some sort of larger problem? They have water. They're right on the pond here. They have access to flowers and trees. This is a very lush area. So I'm very confused why this year has largely been a failure in the bee world back here on my farm. I mean, I say failure in air quotes because I did collect some honey, which is good, but remember the yellow hive that I collected from? That was the second year. I didn't touch anything for the first year. So that means in the span of 2 years, they produced a mason jar and a half of honey. That just doesn't seem normal to me, based on everything I've read anyway. So the other suspicion here is as I break this hive apart, the queen excluder grate that you're going to see, I have some concerns with this. I've found dead bees on top of and below this queen excluder throughout the year when I've come to check it. And it looks like as the bees were trying to work their way up through, they get stuck or squished or their wings are ripped. I'm not sure, but I'm wondering if this plastic queen excluder is not working right. It's not doing what it's supposed to be doing. I mean, it's excluding the queen, which is good, but it seems like it's excluding all of the bees. So, note to self for next year, I'm going to have to search Amazon or some of the bee magazines to see if there's a better queen excluder. So I'm doing some maintenance on the hive, but as I'm doing this maintenance, I'm realizing that this is most likely for nothing. Here we are in October. We have maybe 4 to 6 weeks until the frigid winter weather hits. And these bees don't have any stockpile of honey or nutrition or anything. So very likely it means that this colony is not going to survive the winter. That doesn't mean I'm giving up on them. It just means I'm facing the reality of the situation here as I'm doing the work on this hive, as I'm exploring what the problems might be with this queen excluder or with the hive in general. I just don't know. So to give them the best chance of success, I decided to just leave off the queen excluder and add this top box back on. So this should have been the honey super, but I don't know, maybe in 4 or 6 weeks they could use it as a second brood box and kind of build up their colony. If they have more of a colony and if they can produce more honey, I gave them some pollen patties here, maybe they have a shot of making it through the winter. And then I'll have to buy another honey super box next year and add that to the top of it, if they survive. Fingers crossed. I don't know, but I'm not overly optimistic about the prospects of this hive. And to that end, I really don't know the prospects of any of these colonies through this coming winter. I've heard bad things about what this winter is going to bring. I don't want this video to be all doom and gloom, so let's get back on track with some honey. So after doing the work on the conventional Langstroth hive, I did some inspecting on this Auto-Flow Beehive, and I noticed that there was an okay amount of honey in the center 2 or 3 honey supers. So I figured, let's try a late season honey collection using this new hive. Now, this hive is brand new this year. As you recall, I just rehomed the bees into it on Memorial Day weekend 2024. So that was only a few months ago. But now that I know how to work these beehives and this unusual honey mechanism in this Auto-Flow Beehive, I'm just going through and I'm working the mechanism, I'm breaking it free, and fingers crossed, we're going to see some honey flowing here. So with these Auto-Flow Beehives, you have to make sure that they're level. And as you can see in this video, it's really not that level. It's kind of sloping downward toward the front of the table that it's sitting on. So I need to kind of prop up the front of this beehive. And to do that, I just kind of propped up the front of this particular box. And very slowly, honey is making its way through that collection tube. These Auto-Flow beehives have one fundamental design flaw, and that's that the collection vessel is about 12 to 18 inches under the tube where the honey is coming out of. So because there's a stream of honey and there's bees flying everywhere, the bees are attracted to the honey, they touch the honey, and then they get swept down into the collection vessel, the little honey jar, in this case, that I have. So for the entirety of this honey collection time, I'm standing here with a stick, rescuing bees out of the honey that's being collected. I fling them to safety, I try and swat the bees away, and they're attracted to the stick as well, because there's honey on the stick, and it's just a repetitive process over and over. There's 3D printed things that you can print that kind of go over the collection tube and then down over the top of the honey jar, but the honey jar has to be much higher up, closer to that collection tube. So I have seen designs of like a shelf that kind of attaches to the side of these Auto-Flow beehives, specifically the Flow Hive, the name brand, that has additional stuff on it where these shelves can attach to. So I'm designing some shelves that can attach to the side of these Auto-Flow beehives so that I could lift that jar closer to that collection tube, and then hopefully not have this annoying process later on down the road. We'll try that out for the 2025 collection year. But this was just a really fast collection attempt. I just wanted to get some honey, and it looks like I filled the entire jar, which is awesome. Because what I really want to do is try something that I've seen online and that I've tried in person, and that's hot honey. And hot honey is infused with different types of peppers. And this beautiful, clear honey that I collected in October of 2024 is a great candidate. So I'm going to go home to my garden, and I'm going to pick some fresh cherry peppers. I've picked all the red ones for the season. There's a whole bunch of green ones that are still growing, and the green ones this time of year are really, really hot. They have a great flavor, but they're really spicy. And I really don't know how many you're supposed to use, but I'm going to pick a half dozen or so of these peppers. And I'm going to try to infuse my honey with cherry peppers. I can't wait. I've really wanted to try to make hot honey for quite some time. So the first step in making hot honey is, of course, get your peppers, but also to chop up your peppers. You kind of want to get all of the seeds out of them, and you want to chop them so that as the honey is flowing in and around the peppers, it has a lot of surface area of the peppers to draw the pepper flavor from. You really don't need the seeds in it, because the point isn't to make the honey, diabolically hot. It's just to get the flavor of the peppers, the heat that comes from the peppers themselves. Now I had a couple types of peppers, and I chopped them up, and I figured I'll just toss these all into the pot with the honey, and I'll get some good flavor. Now, one critical thing to remember when you're doing this is you cannot boil the honey. You're supposed to put the honey in a saucepan, and you're supposed to bring it up to a temperature where the honey becomes very liquid. You all know the consistency and texture of honey, but when you get it to a certain temperature, it flows like water, and that's the temperature that you want the honey. Do not boil the honey. So once you get it to that temperature, you're supposed to just dump the peppers in, stir them in, make sure they sink, make sure they're very well mixed in with the honey, and then you're supposed to let them simmer for about 15 minutes. Again, you do not want the honey to boil. So I got this situated, and I walked away from the stove for about 30 seconds. I went upstairs, and I figured, it's simmering nicely. I was watching it. What's the worst that could happen if I walk away for 30 seconds? Yeah, well, the honey started to boil. And apparently, once honey reaches a certain temperature, the boiling process goes crazy and it makes the honey foam. And that's about what you're watching right now. And I know what you're thinking. I'm going to come here and I'm going to catch it. I'm going to notice it. I'm going to stop it at the perfect time so as not to cause a horrible mess. This can't be a worst case scenario. Yeah, I was happy and oblivious upstairs putting some laundry away. Had no idea this was happening. Is there still hope? Am I going to be able to save this? Am I going to catch it in time? I know the suspense is driving you crazy. And no, I didn't catch it. I just let the honey boil over, all over my stove. For probably a good 10 minutes, it was like this. I know, this is hard to watch. Just imagine the cleanup of this. The honey spread everywhere, throughout the entire side of the stove. It was boiling away. Remember what I said, you're not supposed to let honey boil? Yeah, well, it's boiling. It's making a mess. But as you're watching this, just think to yourself of all of the amazing infusion that's happening with those peppers inside this foam mess. Yeah, so this was a pain. This was rough to clean up. Some of that sugar started on fire once I dumped it out onto the burner. And the only thing that I can think of is those poor bees. Like, I took all of that honey, and 3/4 of that honey is now laying on the bottom of this stove pan. This could have all been really, really good, bottled, infused, hot honey. And instead, this is a wasted mess. So I'm going to spare you some of the cleanup details, but it took about 2 hours to get this cleaned up. I scooped up a lot of the liquid honey, and then I had to wait for it to kind of solidify. And then I boiled some water, and I dumped the boiled water onto this mess, and very slowly with towels and paper towels and ladles, I scooped it all up, and then I Cloroxed all of it, and my stove was kind of back to normal. So I guess the good news here is the hot honey that I saved, even though it was boiled for 15 minutes, it tastes amazing. It's great. I know they say if you boil honey that you lose all the flavors and stuff, but it really turned out good. So here we are into the spring of 2025. So much more to come. We got to get the field prepped, we have to plant seeds, and you're going to see all of that very soon. So that's the end of this video. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next one.